and welcome to the webinar. We are excited to have you here today as part of our Pathlock Innovation Series. Our session right now is with SAP, titled Expanding Your Business Risk Management Through the Use of SAP Process Control and SAP Access Violation Management by Pathlock. Our presenter today will be Peter Krill. He's the Senior Director, NA Finance and Risk at SAP America. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Peter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie. So thanks for having me today. Like Stephanie mentioned, we're going to talk about SAP, the use of SAP Process Control and SAP Access Violation Management by Pathlock to help manage or expand the risk management. So I think I'd like to start initially by just covering what those two solutions are and what those solutions do by themselves, and then we can talk about how they work together to cover SAP and non-SAP solutions. So SAP Process Control is part of our governance, risk, and compliance solution set here at SAP. First and foremost, I'm going to start on the left-hand side here. It's a solution where you can document all your business and IT controls, right? So it's the single source of truth across the enterprise, and we can expand to SAP and non-SAP with the use of AVM, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But we can plan focus actions to help manage those controls, right? So tests of effectiveness, I call it the life cycle of the control. One of the powerful tools of process control is what we call continuous control monitoring. And that's really on the bottom piece, and that's perform and monitor. But the continuous control monitoring is really taking some of those controls and automating them. So we don't have to go in and manually test the controls. And I'm going to give an example here of the manual process that you typically could go through to manually test controls. So when we talk about the continuous control monitoring and the automated control testing, that's really the power of process control. How can we automate some of the business controls, some of the IT controls, and we're going to walk through some examples on that. The evaluate part is the end-to-end testing and issue resolution. So what happens if there is when we're testing those controls, if there's an issue, right? Or an alert that pops up. With the process control has a whole module that goes through the issue resolution, right? You can monitor that, assign it to resources, and follow through. It also has, which is not depicted here, but a whole policy management module as well. So you can manage and disseminate different policies throughout the organization. And then last but not least is the reporting. So throughout everything that I just mentioned, various dashboards help understand if you're in the middle of a control test or what the controls are and how many controls you have per business unit or per process and sub-process. There's a whole reporting module for process control. When we talk about SAP Access Violation Management by Pathlock, so just kind of some history, Pathlock is a solution extension partner of SAP's, a very valued partner in our ecosystem. And SAP Access Violation Management is a solution that's developed and maintained and owned by Pathlock, but this is written on SAP paper and sold through SAP. So it's gone through a very extensive testing, but this is our main product that we have through our partnership. So Access Violation Management by Pathlock does really two things. On the left-hand side here, it's the System Integration Edition. So the main use case or the more known use case is for extending out SAP Access Control, right? So when we talk about SAP Access Control, that's our segregation of duty measurement tool, right? That really measures what can users do in the system. How do we extend that out to non-SAP systems, non-ABAP systems. We do that with Access Violation Management Integration Edition. We can also do that for SAP Process Control, and that's what I'm going to focus on, obviously, today, is we can extend out those continuous control monitoring capabilities that I was referring to, those automated control tests, to non-SAP systems. And that's the focus of today. Part of Access Violation Management on the right-hand side is the Risk Assessment Edition. And that's really what did happen, right, from an SOD standpoint. So outside the process control extension, and kind of going back to the access control, extending access control to non-SAP or to SAP, the Risk Assessment Edition doesn't just extend, it looks into SAP's logs as well, and now we're going to focus on what actually happened from an SOD standpoint. So if we have an SOD that we have a mitigating control for, instead of having to manually test those mitigating controls, we can use Access Violation Management Risk Assessment Edition to monitor if a user, say from a business standpoint, create a purchase order and then maintain vendor master data for that purchase order to change, say, the bank record, right, for when that gets paid. So we can actually see a did do, right? So that's really the power of AVM by Pathlock. Now, what I'd like to do is just get into kind of when we talk about business controls and how do we help automate that, or right, automate the testing of it. I want to go through kind of an example of just how many people are involved when you have to test a manual control or setting up and testing of a manual control. So controls, business controls come in from either different regulatory agencies, but there's a risk or control requirement that's identified. So now we have a reviewer and we have the IT or the compliance team define steps required for that manual control. We identify what standard reports we can use. We develop maybe custom queries to create those reports now to look at what that control could be, right? Or what we have to measure with that control. And then once that's all identified, the report is validated for completeness, work instructions are created for the reviewer, and then there's a whole bunch of manual steps that are developed and performed for periodic reporting, right? For SOD, ITGC, the process control, right? So there's a whole bunch of manual processes that go in just in developing what that control will be. Now, when we have to actually test that control, what are the steps for testing the control? We go out, we collect data from multiple different reports, from all those different queries. We have to run those queries. We have to coordinate a team from the business side to gather different data from different reports, whether it be SAP systems, whether it be non-SAP systems. So that takes quite a bit of time. And then we review, the compliance team or the business team has to review those periodic reports and then coordinate the completion of the review and the testing of that control with the compliance team. Again, all manual, all through email, all manual process. Are there any control violations? Are there no violations? So we're good. Are there false positives? How do we interpret that? Are there missed events within this? Then you have to have a remediation process. If there is a violation, is there no violations? Are there false positives? Then we have to investigate what those all mean, right? We have to capture and retain the documentation as proof of our review, right? So from a compliance standpoint, it has to be documented within a system, or in this case, manually. And then there's the preparation for audit to review, right? Because they're going to come back because we've done this whole process from the creation or identification of a risk or control that's needed down to documenting all the control, and then now we're going to test it. And now we're going to review what that business control was and now we have to audit it, or the audit team has to audit it. So we have our audit team looking back, talking to the business and so forth. Now, if we had a solution that could automate that process, right? We document it within SAP Process Control. We plan, so this part up here, identifying what the control is, documenting it now into a system, SAP Process Control, identifying what those steps are, what queries we need to create within SAP or non-SAP, but those queries are created in Process Control. Now we have one system that has all of our control data, and now we have to test it. Well, we can schedule that test moving forward. We collect the data from those multiple systems. So we collect it from SAP natively out of SAP Process Control. And now we can also collect that data from non-SAP systems using SAP Access Violation Management by Pathlock, that integration piece. This SAP Process Control is going to run tests on that data, looking for, in my example of changing vendor master data and creating a purchase order within a certain period of time, SAP Process Control is going to look at that data that we received, that document number, and see if that same user ID created a purchase order, say in Ariba, SAP's Ariba, and then set up payment for that in SAP S/4HANA. So if a user does that cross-system, the same user for the same document number, we want our process control to alert that. So we can, that's the data collection that we're doing it from multiple different systems. Is that a violation? Absolutely, right? Now we create an issue, or the system creates an issue. And again, all this is done automatically within process control, but we're connecting to those systems across our enterprise with process control and Pathlock, and the AVM by Pathlock. We investigate the issue, we capture and retain the documentation within process control, and then we have now read-only capability available for our audit team. So now the audit team can go in, see what issues we had, see what data we collected, see if it was a false positive, if it was, through a mitigating control, now somebody else is going to check to make sure that, I didn't create any fraud or risk, right? And all that is done, again, through process control, automated through the tool. So I just want to walk through how we extend that and going through process control through AVM. And this is an example of enabling IT policy continuous control monitoring for IT policies in SAP process orchestration, right, with process control. So process orchestration is a system that SAP process control as a tool cannot connect to natively. So Access Violation Management System Integration Edition extracts that data from SAP process orchestration and provides it to process control for analysis. The control is to ensure that this control that we're going to give an example of is to ensure that IT password policies are maintained in SAP PO. So just kind of from a visual, we have process control to the left, SAP Access Violation Management System Integration Edition with Pathlock. It sits in Pathlock Cloud, and that's going to extract that information via web service from SAP PO. The business rule that we have set up in process control is for the password parameters for applications, databases, operating systems are systematically enforced and complies with the policy, right? And this is grayed out because it's an example of a real company that's using this policy. Process control is configured to monitor the changes in the local parameter values. So if you think about it, process control can monitor this within SAP ABAP systems very or natively. This is why we're doing PathLock into SAP PO. It's a non-ABAP system. The data source, we're setting up the data source. This is our data source to monitor the change value in SAP PO, the password parameters. The object field here is an example. This is the parameter value within a SAP PO. So this is the system info, and then the fields that are down below are those password value fields. Example of the connector, right? So just real easy, we created a connector within our within process control. It's connecting it to through AVM into PO. This is an example of the business rule that we've created, right? So, not gonna get in the name, but this is the rule that we're gonna have a check. It's an exception category, right? And we're checking this connector for the data source that we set up in the previous step. We're looking at, this is the job name for the continuous monitoring scheduler, right? So when I said it automatically checks, we create a business or a background job that goes out and tests that field to make sure that the passwords are being changed within the policy that we've created. So this is the actual job monitor. The regulations is the SOX. That's the job name. And this is the control, is the monitor password parameters. Exception result. So this is the example of what came back, right? So we've had all this things above, sequence number, deficiency was high because the policy value was false, right? So this particular test came back and showed that that password change had not happened. So this is just an example of one of the applications that we can monitor using SAP Process Control and extending that out into non-SAP systems with PathLock by AVM. Now I'm going to go back here. As you can see and kind of visualize, the manual step was very tedious, for lack of a better word. When you're, again, identifying the risk, documenting that manually, think about doing it in maybe a SharePoint system or a file system. You're developing, okay, now I've got to go capture what data. I'm creating different queries, right? I'm capturing that data. I'm making sure that I'm capturing the right data. I'm validating all of that report for completeness, what work instructions are created for the reviewer to review that data to make sure that they're looking at that password field to make sure that they can understand if it was marked as changed or not changed. I need access for that person in SAP PO. And then all the steps that we need to do in order to test that, right? So now that's just the documentation piece. And I know I'm reviewing what we've talked about before, but I just kind of want to identify how simple this makes it, right? Now I run those background jobs that I referred to. We run those out of process control. It uses the AVM by PathLock to go out and collect that data from the non-SAP systems, right? From multi reports, and we correlate that all within process control. Process control runs that data collection through that background job automatically. You can do that every day or you can do that every week. Usually it's weekly for something like a password policy, right? Or monthly. And then I'm saying, okay, what result? I'm telling process control to tell me what constitutes a violation, right? or an exception. So now we just look at a report and we can see what violations we have. Now that control owner can go in, look for those issues, identify what we need to do to remediate it, right? Is it a matter of sending a note to the user that didn't change their password, right? Capturing it, retaining documentation that we've run it, maybe we're clear, we have no violations. This shows that we're monitoring that control and that we've reviewed it and took remediation processes for any different violations that happen. And now we set it up for our auditors to utilize process control to come in and look for the results of our control tests, our continuous control monitoring tests. But it's all hands, this whole lower box here is all automated and doesn't require user intervention if policies are met, right? So we're testing it, we're documenting the results, we're having that documentation of results available for our audit team within one tool. And that's really how we can expand that business risk management through the use of process control and AVM by Pathlock. But I think the key is process control can be that one system. With access violation management, we can connect and extend that capability really to any system within your enterprise. So I tend to talk pretty fast when I'm doing these presentations, but that's what I have, and I haven't been monitoring chat, but are there any questions that came in, Stephanie, through chat?
Yes, we had a few. Again, if you have any questions, please add them now into the questions box on your control panel. Perfect. Okay, so our first question is, which are the sub-scenarios needed to be used to connect with non-SAP systems while configuring a CCM? And which are the sub-scenarios needed to use to connect with a non-SAP system?
So I think the sub-scenarios really can be any, right? It's a matter of identifying what scenario you want to monitor in that non-SAP system. So the step really is connecting to that non-SAP system through AVM. So we identify that in this example that we use today, the SAP PO system as a target, and then the scenarios are the data fields that we're collecting from that SAP PO system, right? So when we create our queries and we look for password change, if you think about that policy is really goes across our enterprise, right? So we can use that for SAP systems natively out of process control. So we don't need to identify a non-ABAP system, right, with AVM. When we identify a non-ABAP system through AVM, it's just a matter of saying, okay, now we're going to that system and connecting and grabbing the data out of that system. Hope that helps.
Okay, great. And then the next question is, do we need to create connectors in the target system as well?
So through AVM, there needs to be a web service connection, but it's not a connector in that system. It's more of if that system has either APIs or web services that can be utilized to gather that data from AVM. So AVM will connect into that target system, but there's not any additional software that needs to be installed in that system. It's mainly just whether it be an API, whether it be a web service that can be exposed for AVM to grab that data.
Okay, and then a follow-up question to that is, what is the configuration that you need to perform to connect the SAP GRC PC and SAP AVM by Pathlock?
So the configuration, there's two pieces, right? So once you have that AVM system integration is a separate SKU that you need to purchase through SAP. But once you have all the commercial aspects done, the PathLock team helps you with that integration. So on the process control side, it's really identifying through the configuration within process control a target system. The target system you're really identifying from process control is the system that AVM has identified as a target system. So you're really connecting process control to AVM with the help of PathLock, and then PathLock also helps. They have services on the implementation side that will help you connect and configure the target systems to bring it into AVM to pass it back to process control. So it's the first step is really the configuration of PathLock or AVM to whatever target system, and then you connect process control just like you would connect any system within process control. You just identify it as a target system within process control. I think I showed an example of setting up that target system.
We just wanted to say thank you to Peter from SAP for this presentation today, and thank you to all of you for attending. If you do have any more questions for us, we're happy to answer those. You just email us at info@pathlock.com. And with that, thank you so much, and we hope to see you at future events.